Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be continuing the Versus series. Now this Versus video is going to be between the Spectacular Spider-Man and the 90s Spider-Man. Of course, this is just giving you guys my opinion, and you guys can leave your opinions down below in the comments. So let's start with the Spectacular Spider-Man today. Now, there's a lot good going for this show. The animation, the character development, Peter Parker as Spider-Man, of course. But there's a lot of things that do bother me as well. Now, the villains, of course, I do not like Kraven the Hunter. They didn't do good with Kraven the Hunter at all, in my opinion. I don't like that they give him the serum to turn into the lion. Now, I wish they would have kept him as the human form because he was actually pretty cool. And I'm pretty sure he could have took on Spider-Man if he kept trying. But the villains, for example, they only had the Lizard for like a couple of episodes and then just left it done for like they mentioned it, they go back to like referencing it, but it doesn't happen often. I think season 1 was at its prime. Season 1 was really good, and then you start off really well in season 2, but then towards the end, like with Pyro, I felt like Pyro wasn't a good like character. I think that's his name, Pyro, but it was a fire character. I think Liz's brother, and I didn't like that character at all. I mean, it was just boring, dull, and I felt like it was done with. It just feels like another simple villain. Now, with season 2, of course, Venom does come back, and the battle between them, how it ends, is actually really good. I feel like they based the 2 seasons mainly on Venom too much, though. Venom was understood in this series, which was really well done, but you don't have to put him in there for every single thing. They do have Venom in there for a long time. So if they were to make a season 3, I feel like Cletus Cassidy would be a perfect villain for the next series, and to leave Venom alone. I wouldn't bring back Venom at all. I feel like you could give him nightmares or something, like give him a nice story, Eddie Brock a nice story, but I would not bring back Venom at all. The villains in this show are okay. I'm not going to give them the like 10 out of 10 saying they're the best because they're not. When they team up, they suck. Honestly, they don't work together as a team. Honestly, it's just Doc Octopus giving them orders to take out Spider-Man, and they cannot even do that. They didn't even capture Spider-Man. Now, in the 90s series, they captured him, and they're still idiots, of course, but I'll explain that later in the video. Now, of course, if season 3 does come out, I would love it if they decided to bring new villains in. They use these villains too much in the first 2 seasons, and it's kind of overdone. Shows tend to use their characters too much where it gets annoying. Now, season 1, like I said before, was in their prime. I think season 1 was the best. Flash Thompson and Peter Parker, how their relationship was better than most shows and movies where they represent Peter and Flash's relationship. Another one of my favorite things in the show is the Raimi Spider-Man references. Like on the train scene, the swinging scenes, the fighting scenes between all the villains. There is a lot that they use from those movies. And of course, the Raimi movies, they got all of their content from the 90s series. If you watch the 90s series, that was made before Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. And there's so much from that series, from the 5 seasons they had, that they used in the Sam Raimi universe, and then the Spectacular Spider-Man took on all of that and brought it into their show, but also put a twist of their own in it. Another one of my favorite things in the show was Peter Parker debating if he should take away his powers. Now, his powers were a big reason why he would either mess up with relationships or just not even pay attention to his friends and family. Now, of course, his powers make him Spider-Man, but a lot of the time he doesn't want to be Spider-Man. And I love when Peter Parker does that. And he doesn't ever take his powers away, but he will get close to doing it. And it gets you thinking. You know what's going to happen next, but you're like, what? Wait, don't do that. And it still makes you think he's going to take his powers away. Now, the black suit in this film is one of my favorite things in this show. He's powerful, he can take on any villain with ease. He doesn't have the black suit for long though, and it came pretty early in the series. Now, they take their own twist on him stealing it. Now, in comics and in the 90s show, people say he steals it, and that's part of the story that everyone thinks he steals the black symbiote, and nobody knows what it really is. But this time, it's a little bit of their own twist. Now, when Peter Parker in the black suit takes on all of the villains, he can do it with ease. And of course, with the black suit, you can see Spider-Man 2 references, Spider-Man 3 references all the time. And I don't mind. I don't mind seeing all these references to the films. It's cool to see because a lot of them have them in common. And it's like a multiverse phenomenon, you know? But there's also a couple things when Peter's fighting with the symbiote and he's in his head and all that, and the Uncle Ben stuff comes back. I do not like it. That just kind of was... It felt like a filler to just bring in some content that wasn't needed. I feel like when he's trying to take off the suit or to fight Venom, I feel like he needs more of a story and a longer episode for that. Now, overall, the Spectacular Spider-Man series is amazing, and I want to move on to the 90s series before making my choice. Now, moving on to the 90s series of Spider-Man. This is the Spider-Man I grew up watching. I didn't watch the full episodes. I watched some when they were on TV, and that was very rare when a Spider-Man show was on TV. Now, I did see this Spider-Man, and I grew up with a lot of the scenes from it, a lot of the episodes, and watching it on TV. Now, this show is amazing. The suits, the animation, the costumes for the villains are classic. Now, of course, this was around the time when they were just making comics, and there wasn't really any movies to bring out the Spider-Man name. Now, I love how this is based on the comics, and they went simple. When they made new storylines, they were actually interesting, and I really love it. Now, what I want to start off with is the villains. Scorpion, Electro, Rhino, the whole Sinister Six. They worked so well together, but by the end of some of the episodes when they teamed up, they kind of split apart, and I loved that because they didn't want to stick with each other. Some of the villains wanted to team up, some of them didn't, but they had to agree because they kind of had no choice, but they wanted to take down Spider-Man, and Kingpin proved it. Now, Kingpin is a big part of this series as well, and Kingpin is a favorite of mine. Now, of course, if you've seen Daredevil, you see Kingpin's a villain in there, and that's when he's my favorite character as well. Now, Daredevil does show up in this series, but we'll go on to that a little bit later. Now, of course, the villains, each of them have their own storyline. You see how each of them are created. Now, of course, you have Mysterio, you have Rhino, and you have all of these good characters. Now, of course, Electro does not show up until later seasons. Now, of course, Electro isn't a part of the Sinister Six, which is kind of disappointing, but you already have the Shocker, so it's basically a little bit of the same thing. Now, of course, what I do wish they did was introduce Electro as one of Spider-Man's first villains, but instead they moved on to different villains. Now, quickly, what I want to move on to something I dislike about the villains is Electro. Okay, Electro is, of course, a cool character, but when they introduce him, he's Red Skull's son. Okay, and that is something I do not like, and I wish that they rethought that over. But I didn't know that they did that in the comics, and so that's why they did it. Now, something else I liked in this series was the black symbiote suit. This allowed him to change clothing, allowed him to enhance his anger, but he doesn't know that. But it is so cool what he does with the suit and how strong he gets. Now, the Spectacular Spider-Man does show more of him getting stronger and shows more strength. Now, the way this Peter Parker in the 90s series takes on the Rhino in the black symbiote costume is really intimidating for the villains. Now, of course, I love the suit, in his red suit, of course, more than any of the suits he uses in this series. Now, for the end of the series, he teams up with the Spider-Verse, and that's another fan favorite of mine, and something I'm happy they did. A storyline they did bring up is when he mutates. Peter Parker mutates, grows the other arms, and then becomes a big spider, and he becomes the villain of the series. That is something I really do enjoy, and I wish we could see way more of. And it kind of just lasted 2 episodes as a two-parter thing. Now, whenever they would have a new story for this series, they would make it about 5 or 6 episodes. It was nice. It was cool to see that they would continue on and focus on these characters and not having to rush them. Now, if you just gave me a show with just Peter Parker and it's being Spider-Man all day without having to deal with family, that would be pretty cool. But the fact that Peter Parker is so good with Aunt May and that him and MJ's relationship is kind of confusing, but they still come back together is so nice. In the Raimi films, MJ, of course, is a cheater. She cheats on everybody in that film, in the series, and it pisses me off. This MJ in the 90s series is amazing. This MJ, for sure, loves Peter, but she has to prove herself. Dude, she jumps off a freaking building and waits until Peter catches her to see if he really loves her and will always be there for her. Now, of course, he couches her, okay? And a couple episodes later, or I think it's like 5 episodes later, you see her fall into the Manhattan River, okay? You see that happening. And sorry, I don't know the name of the river. I don't know. I honestly forgot it. But she seems to have died. Now, she doesn't die, of course, and there's a whole story behind it you have to watch. I'm not going to spoil it. But there's so many good things that Peter does as Spider-Man as well. Another one of my favorite things is when Peter Parker goes to, of course, the X-Mansion to seek help, but they can't really help him because they do not see his mutation as a bad thing, and Peter does. Now, of course, Beast follows him, gets kidnapped and whatnot, and Wolverine goes to find him and ends up with a team-up between Wolverine and Spider-Man and the Beast. Which, honestly, I love the idea of that, and it worked really well. The fight between Spider-Man, how he can take on the X-Men, really works. And it's not really a fight, but he can get away and he knows what he's doing. Now, for sure, the X-Men, of course, are great characters. If you've seen the old X-Men TV show, it's amazing, and they're coming out with a new version or an extended part, like a new season, at the end of 2023. It should be coming around October, November, December. I have no idea when. But honestly, it worked so well in this series. Now, here's some things I don't like. Hydro Man, his character development. Morbius, his character development. Felicia Hardy was very annoying at her beginnings, but like towards the end, when she became Black Cat, it was very enjoyable. And there's not a lot to dislike about this series. And I really love the 90s series. I will never dislike it. Now, between the Spectacular Spider-Man and the 90s Spider-Man, there's a lot to go for them. They know what they're doing. The series itself, both of them, have their strong points. Now, I like when there's more seasons. That's a big thing for the 90s series. He had about 5 seasons, and it had about 20 episodes per each. I think 28 episodes for each, and it was very enjoyable. The 90s series knew what they were doing with their storylines. Some of them not really, but most of them just did beautifully, and it got me interested in the series. Now, some villains, actually most villains, were better in the 90s series than the Spectacular Spider-Man series. I didn't like a lot of the villains in the Spectacular Spider-Man series, except for the Goblin. They did the Goblin right. They also did it right in the 90s series. Now, in my opinion, and my final choice will be the 90s series. The 90s series was longer. It had everything going for it. Some of the storyline and characters I didn't like, but it still worked. The Spectacular Spider-Man is still amazing. I always watch this, and it's perfect if you're a Spidey fan. If you're a Spidey fan and you haven't seen this one, watch the Spectacular Spider-Man, but also watch the 90s Spider-Man. They both are different. One's older Peter Parker and one's a younger Peter Parker. It's really nice to see both sides of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Now, the 90s Spider-Man is just buff as heck. He's ripped, okay? And then you have a little bit more of a scrawny Peter Parker, but he still has his six-pack and everything, you know? But both of the shows were really well done, but at the end of the day, I will be choosing the 90s Spider-Man show. Now, of course, your guys' opinions do matter. So, if you guys chose the 90s Spider-Man or you chose the Spectacular Spider-Man, go ahead and drop that down below in the comments and let me know why. I want to see why you guys chose them. It's a lot of opinions I really do care about. Now, there are going to be polls uploaded on my YouTube for community and on Instagram. So, if you guys see those, just click yes or no or which side you choose. It would really help us out for our content. And that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comments, of course, on this video what you thought about the video and what side you choose, 90s Spider-Man or the Spectacular Spider-Man. It's all up to you guys. See you guys in the next video.